Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to engage ourselves in the study of your Torah, in the name of Yeshua Messiah. Amen. Thank you, and please be seated.
Uh, so, thank you all, visitors today, joining us. It's quite the drive, I know. Actually, just so you know, there was one family here that drives an hour and a half just to come because there's no other place to meet. So, if that's an encouragement, then find a place you enjoy and, you know, uh, down, up and back. Okay, there we go. Okay, now I won't pop so much. So yes, to those of you who drove here today, we appreciate you putting the time and the effort to come here. We know it's also for the children. It can be a little bit challenging too. Um, and so thank you for coming to join us today. As alongside Brother Llewell and other of us men here, I'm one of the other men and leaders as well here. And I am blessed once in a while to do the facilitating of the teaching. And so you'll see here, as I called the title for today is Elohim dwelling with us again. And you might, of course, you're maybe wondering, why might I say again? So I hope to help us better understand a little bit of that today as we go through our sections. I just want to, it's interesting, as we were just hearing my daughter, our oldest daughter, for those of you who are new, is, I think you met them already, but Yohakima, and so she was reading the Judges portion today for us, and it's interesting there we see that that Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, he shows up, and he comes to, again, bring his people victory. So, and when he comes, he actually comes to talk with him. And it's interesting, if you notice in the context, Gideon is, at first, he doesn't seem to be too afraid. So obviously, there seems to be this idea that, I can see you better today, Andrew. That's where we were sitting is between the Torah scroll there. So he shows up, and it's not a big deal. But then all of a sudden, after he notice that he brought the same meal that you would bring during Pesach or Passover. That those of you who have gone through remember Abraham brought something similar, all right, to the three men who showed up. And but in this one we see that when this one leaves, he leaves in a flame of fire and consumes the sacrifice, the meal that was brought to him. He doesn't just eat it like a regular man might. And then Gideon is afraid, and understandably so, because those of you who know a little bit, it teaches very clearly that no one can see Elohim and live. All right, so that's why he's afraid. He's not afraid just because, what happened. He's actually legitimately concerned because he knows that he believes he's seen Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Elohim himself. And, so he shows up, he talks with him, And as we're going through our study today, you'll start understand a little bit more, hope to even explain a little more why we have this cloud. So the first question, if you want to go to the question there we go. So I hope this helps give a little more reason. I talked about this last month, December 20th, and the reason I showed this picture is you see there that they're afraid. So that's the question is then, why would I call this Elohim dwelling with us again? Maybe that'll give you a little bit more of an idea what I'm going to be talking about. And how we, as you see there, however we got separated, right? That's why they're afraid. The cherubim are sent there, and they're looking back, but they know they can't go back because they've been kicked out. So, and we know that in the beginning, everything was made perfectly. There was no alterations. When Elohim says it's done and finished, means there's nothing that man needs to do to change it. That came later. So we also know that after the 6 days, on the 7th day, he rested and says, today is the day that you will rest. Today is the Shabbat. And he also did that not only for him, but also for mankind, because he wanted mankind to understand that we also need to rest from our work. And because he knows how he created us. In fact, he probably understands us better than we do ourselves a lot of the time. So unfortunately, the reason this all happened was because not too long, the deceiver showed up. And for the reason to deceive Adam and Hava, of course he focused on Hava with Adam right next to him, next to her. So when they eat the fruit, they clearly relinquished the authority. Now, in a sense, you can say that they were given somewhat of a title deed. It's like I've talked about before, buying a house, you get a deed. So they were given the authority to take care of the world at that time by God. And so when the deceiver shows up and they get deceived, then rightfully it goes from them to the one who deceived them. Because when God said to Adam and Hava, you will take care of it, he meant this is your authority over this place. When you need help, there's angels, you can come to me for the help. So when the fall happens, the first thing he needs to do is restore the heart. Because you see there that they're still alive. No. But you see there that they're wearing goat skin. So clearly an animal was killed so that they could be covered like that. And it was interesting. I was listening to Dr. Charles Stanley talk about the fall of man. And he made an interesting comment, was that a person who's fallen understands more of what it means to have grace, what it means to be set free from our fall. But at the same time, as much as that is true, right, and we know Yeshua said that. He said, to those who know that their sin, right, if they understand more, then to them, right, they understand more what it is to be set free. But at the same time, we also need to remember that the question I had while I was listening to him was, Elohim, who is forever righteous and holy, understands more than we do. Even though when he came, he put that down. He didn't lose his righteous standing. He was still perfect while he was here. And for those of you who want to look a little more into that, you can find that I won't go into it too much, Isaiah 53, as well as the end of 52, verse 12 talks about him, about Yeshua and what he did. And also Philippians talks about how he chose to set aside what he had with Elohim. And so that way we would be able to be reconciled to him. Because you notice in our reading today, before I go to the next question, it seems a bit weird because it's all about the how to build the tabernacle. And eventually from there we know Solomon would take that, expound on it, and make it into the temple. But why is that? You ask yourselves, well, why is that even relevant for me today? Why does it matter that I study about the tabernacle, and what can I gain out of that? Now, those of you who have looked at, Roger actually has a book that talks about that, which I'm going through again right now, and how it would have looked like. For those of you who are interested, you can find it on Amazon. Anyway, the reason that that's there, and that book talks about that, is because it's trying to show that this relation, how he wants to restore the relationship. So if you want to go to the next, thank you. So you see the picture of the ark and the rainbow, and the question there is, how is he going to restore what we broke? Now, obviously we know Noah, people like Abel and Enoch before him, were clearly walking with Elohim through faith. Okay, the same faith that we have. We're looking back to where when Yeshua came, they're looking ahead, knowing that he will come one day. So then why is it still important that we have these specific ways of how Elohim wants us to honor him? Why is that important to me today? And so after the fall, we see that people began to call upon Elohim again. And we see in the life of Abel, Enoch, and Noah, who are mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11 as some of the fathers of our faith. Clearly Elohim was dwelling with man as before, though he could not have the relationship with us until the physical was restored. So what I mean by that is, like he was before Adam and Hava fell, he couldn't, because we're still in our fallen bodies at this point, he wanted to have relationship with us, but how does he make us righteous so that we can now be able to have that communion again? So what's he going to do in the meantime? Because we know one day he is going to return in bodily form for eternity, and we're going to rule and reign with him. And so we see here that Noah believed, and we see eventually. You can go to the next question there. I'll spend a little more time with this picture up. But so the next question then is, what man and what people group would he choose for this man to represent? So, there's a lot of people on the earth by this point, right? But Elohim is going to choose one. And we know eventually it would be Abraham. He calls Abraham out. And, there's a lot of different midrash on that. I won't go into that. But some about maybe he already had this idea that there had to be another God out there that was stronger than the ones that they followed. Because there was a lot of gods at that time. And so there was a funny story talking about how, these Abraham and these idols, they end up fighting, and one of them falls over, and then one of them gets broken, and then the father supposedly comes back and asks, well, what happened? Why did you break it? He's like, oh, I didn't. And, then from there, kind of the idea that, if these gods are so powerful, why can't they take care of themselves? But anyway, regardless, Abraham was chosen by Elohim. We don't know all the details of what happened before that. So Abraham gets chosen, and he would be the father of, eventually we'll get to Moses, you see there, he would be the father. Of course, we would have Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs would go on. And so Moses would be raised. And I'd like to go into the history a little bit here, just so you kind of know how we got to this point and why that was built. So eventually we get Jochebed, and who's the mother, and Aram's the father, Moses, and he would flee Egypt, come back. By this point, he's already seen the burning bush, and God has called him to go and rescue his people from Egypt, and which to us would also mean one day we'll be rescued from our sinful nature. That's why we remember the Pesach, the Passover meal, once a year. So Elohim would now bring Israel out from the bondage of Egypt through his hand and in his time. We notice that many of those who left Egypt, making up Israel, did not have the personal relationship that Moses has. And we see this kind of played out because, clearly it was Moses who's the representative, Moses interceding. We know there was some who had a closer relationship, such as Joshua and Caleb, and maybe Hur and Aaron and others. But most of them, unfortunately, shortly after they come out, we know the story of the golden calf event. So we can go to, so why then did Elohim have to physically dwell with us when he was already dwelling with us through faith? So you can go to the next question there. So here we see, there's a picture there. I'll explain that in a little bit. Anyway, it is true that people were already walking and talking with Elohim, similar to that of Adam and Hava. But we do ourselves a disservice if we forget that he created the world for him to show up and talk with us as we do with each other. From the start, we see three different people who the scripture more than once attend to the faith they had in Elohim. We see as well that when they asked Elohim for something, he would give the answer through what is in the world. So something he would physically sometimes answer them if they wanted something on this earth. For example, with Caleb, right, he goes to Moses, and when he asks for Moses what he wants, Moses gives it to him. God gives it to him through Moses, and it's land. It was, in that case, it was actually land. So again, a reminder that the physical is important to our Creator. Many of us have come out of the idea, sometimes those of you who really are into Gnosticism and how that unfortunately has some way shaped Christianity, that it's almost as if the spiritual has is better than the physical, that God doesn't seem to care too much about the physical anymore. But we do know that clearly the physical is important to him, or he wouldn't have blessed the place that Solomon built. So in our parasha today, our Torah section, it talks about all of that. And it's amazing to see how the memory that Moses had, because Elohim says to him, you must build it exactly as you saw it. And he goes down, he remembers exactly what Elohim showed him. He doesn't go like, okay, I forgot, Elohim, can you remind me today? So it also shows the power that Elohim has to choose to give to man to be able to remember what he said. So this is why we need to build it. This is why we need to study it. And those of you who are coming out of the there's a John Wesley Methodist. Okay, so they actually have a series called in the Bible, and they actually believe that the tabernacle was made up by the Pharisees. And that seems a bit odd when Elohim said, build it exactly as I said. And this is the only physical building that Elohim asked through Moses for man to build. So to say that it was just a fabrication, especially when you read Leviticus, things like that, talks about all the rules and regulations. And it's also Roger that mentioned that as well. So, and as we know that he would one day send his innocent die and rise from the dead to intercede for us, the inference could be made that the sacrifice would have to be innocent so that they could commune with him in the desert. And we know that the animals had done nothing deserving of death. So they were, in that sense, they were perfect. And the sins of Israel would be passed to the animal. We also need to know that though they were bringing the sacrifices they should, and though they would have all had a personal relationship to a certain degree, but it's because clearly they were personally bringing it to him. Now, how much of that they understood, we don't know. We just know a few of them clearly had saving faith. So in an Isaiah text, I just want to mention one thing out of there because it's talking about, again, how one day Elohim will restore what man has lost, and he will restore it for eternity. And it's interesting if you read that passage there where it talks about, and I'll just pull it up quick, talks about those who believe that they are doing God's will, that he will actually show that they are not doing what he asked. And you ask yourself, well, why is that? Right? Were they not bringing the sacrifices, some of those things? Well, some of the time they were bringing the sacrifices. And but in this case, something's lost. Something has changed why they're doing it. It seems to become more of a tradition at this point. So he says, and for my hand has made all these things. So all these things came to be, declares Adonai. But on this one will I look, one who humble of a contrite spirit, who trembles at my word. One who kills an ox is like one who kills a man. One who sacrifices a lamb is like one who breaks a dog's neck. And then I'll jump down here. Verse 5, hear the word of Adonai, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hated you, excluding you for my name's sake, have said, let Adonai be glorified, that they may see your joy, but they will be put to shame. So these people, whoever they are believing that what they're doing on the outright, it looks good. It looks like they're doing the right thing. And but God says to them that no, that's not the case. So something was lost there. And so again, this tabernacle is being built so that we can know how we're supposed to walk in his presence. And if we look at 1 Corinthians verse 14, I believe that is kind of connecting what this chapter 6 is talking about. How, and Elohim hath both raised up the Lord and will raise us up by his own power. So again, he's going to restore the relationship that man had lost. So this tabernacle was then a place for all of us to be able to see how our relationship could be restored. And it's interesting too, if those of you who have studied a little bit more, when they left Egypt, there was this mixed multitude that comes out of Egypt. And okay, well, why? How come this mixed multitude happened to be there? and if you read people like Josephus, and if you've also followed a lot, those of you who recently, like I should say not that recently, but in the 80s, and there was 2 times, and before that, anyways, 2 times where the Jews have 2 different operations to rescue the Jews out of Ethiopia. And Josephus actually talks about the story where Moses, before he flees Egypt, he actually goes down to Ethiopia because he's now the general of the Egyptian army. Because they were actually losing the battle to Egypt at this point. Or sorry, they were losing it to Ethiopia. So they realized, well, what are we going to do to beat them? So they put Moses in charge for some reason. And because God's clearly with him, God shows him what to do to get the victory. And when he gets the victory, he quickly is able to defeat Ethiopia, goes to where the king and the princess are living, because he's pushed them back to that far. And the princess falls in love with Moses. And so Moses and the princess start this relationship. And the princess says, if I go and talk to my father, will you and get his permission that I can marry you, will you allow my father and those in his family essentially to live? Moses is like, yes. So Moses and her end up getting married. Then, anyways, so Zipporah is, though the Bible doesn't mention this one that Moses married before, Zipporah would actually have been a wife that came later. Although clearly it doesn't seem, we don't read any children in the scriptures that mention any other children besides the one that Moses had with Zipporah. Now, maybe there's other history on that. I haven't seen or heard of any that talks about Moses having other kids before Zipporah. So scripturally speaking, we know there's just 2. And so because of this, now clearly there was a lot of people who were in Egypt. So when the Israelites leave, there's those who, even if they had lost their oldest son, and even the firstborn of the cattle were also killed, they would have been like, this God who, even though he destroyed my firstborn, I think I'm going to go out and join them because our gods could do nothing. So, some of us would probably be thinking the same thing. Let's go with them. Why would we stay here? And why not go and follow the God of Israel, even though they're going into the desert? But they obviously had some faith to say, well, if God can do this to my gods, our gods, then he can also protect us. So while they're out there, they build the tabernacle because at this point, as you know, they had taken all of the gold and materials that they were rightfully given because of how they were treated. And so that way they could build what they needed to. As well as, it's interesting, if you go to Israel today, it would be very different. In fact, that land where they traveled through for 40 years would have been very different back then because of the flood that covered the world at that time. So there would have been a lot of the trees, like if you go today, acacia trees, the shittim trees really are not that large, big enough to build what Moses was asked. So these acacia trees would have had to be massive, similar to, so my wife's from the Philippines, and they have these acacia trees that you can't even put your arms around. They're so large. And so they clearly would have had something like that they could have used to build the tabernacle when they're out there. Because it doesn't seem like that's part of what they were given when they left Egypt, these huge trees that were cut down that they would carry with them until they needed to build them. From what we understand, it says that Bezalel and Holiab were the ones in charge of erecting the tabernacle. And they were good at carpentry and all that, so they clearly could have cut down their own trees. So he builds it, and he builds it for all of us. So you notice I mentioned before that there was a mixed multitude. So the mixed multitude were clearly those who had no bloodline back to Abraham. And so God was saying that this is supposed to be for all the people. So we will now spend, those who are saved out of the nations and those who are there because they do not want to die will bring all of the valuables from all over the world in worship to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We will now spend eternity worshiping him the way the tabernacle in the wilderness and all of its ordinances point us to. We will have the communion with him that he originally created for us. For it is by faith in what Messiah Yeshua did that we are now able to walk in his ways, bringing sacrifices acceptable to him as they did in the wilderness. So that's what's going to happen. That's what Isaiah 66 talks about. Again, that and other places we know in the Bible also talk about when all of the nations will bring all of the gold, everything to Israel, to Jerusalem. And just like, in a sense, similar to what they did then. And the other thing too is, so the reason this points us to Yeshua, because if you read in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 4, it says, in the version that I chose from, which is the King James Version, for it is not possible for the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sins. So again, how then can the blood of bulls and goats point us to Yeshua? It's only through the faith that we have, that those who, like Moses and others, had in what the sacrifices pointed to, that they could have the same faith as we do today. And so that's also why when Yeshua comes, he comes as our propitiation. He comes to make us righteous in the sight of his Father, and now our Father. So we don't have to continue to bring and you can go to the next slide there, the one with, back to the one at the beginning, sorry. One more. There you go. So, so that way we can now be again restored and back to how Adam and Hava had originally had their relationship. And as we read in the famous prayer of Solomon, and I'll just read what I wrote here. And so Solomon, in his great blessing over Israel, after the temple was finished, temple. I'm wondering why I'm showing the tabernacle. I'll mention the tabernacle as well. The cloud of glory fills the temple just like it did in the finishing of the tabernacle. So you notice that cloud there. When before they celebrated for 2 weeks, Sukkot. So Sukkot is generally 1 week. But to show that this relationship that the people wanted, that Solomon had he wanted for all his people, that one day we're going to have our relationship with him for eternity. It's not going to be 1 week or 2 weeks. It's going to be eternity. So the idea is, the reason he made it longer is to show that one day we will spend our lives worshiping with him. So chapter 8 shows us how he chose the physical building to dwell with us, and through the renewed one, and though the renewed one will be far greater, because we know there's going to be a new one. You know, whether it's going to be like a tabernacle or a temple, it's hard to say for sure, but it is going to happen one day, because John in Revelation talks about it. I hope this significance will not be lost on us, how all of man was meant to dwell with him, how he said at the same place, Exodus 40, verse 35, and Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation, because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh filled the tabernacle. And in 1 Kings, so very similar, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh had filled the house of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And just as a mixed multitude left Egypt, Exodus 12, verse 38, first part says, and a mixed multitude went up, also up with them. Solomon refers to the stranger who turns to this house, believing in the Elohim of Israel, facing the temple, that their prayers will be answered as well. 1 Kings 8, verse 41 to 43 says, moreover, concerning a stranger that is not of thy people Israel, but cometh out of a far country for thy name's sake, for they shall hear of thy great name, and of thy strong hand, and of thy stretched out arm, when he shall come and pray toward this house. Hear thou in heaven thy dwelling place, and do according to all that the stranger calleth thee for, that all people of the earth may know thy name, to fear thee as do thy people Israel, and that they may know that this house which I have builded is called by thy name. So there you have that. Even Solomon has this idea that everyone will one day worship the God of Israel, who is the true God.
Thank you very much, Brother Wesley, for that presentation. Lois, would you help me, please, on the slides? All right, so may we request our men, please, to